Hi everybody. I'm just going to try to do this with my phone here and see what happens. Today we'll be talking about Close to Thee, hymn tune, Close to Thee. Ah, how convenient. But in the Methodist hymnal, it is the only tune associated with this particular hymn, number 407. In fact, I have not ever seen any other lyrics attached to this music. The lyrics were composed by heavy hitter Fanny Crosby, 1820 to 1915. This blind American mission worker, poet, lyricist, teacher, and composer who was known for creating lyrics to a whopping 3,000 hymns all across the country. By the end of the 19th century, she was a household name, a superstar of her craft, and 7 of her hymns can be found in our hymnal. But keep in mind, some publishers were hesitant to have so many hymns by one person in their hymnals. So Crosby used 200 different pseudonyms during her career. It's fun to imagine she has a few more references in our hymnal, and we just don't know. Crosby's work is commonly associated with the American holiness movement of the second half of the 19th century. What is that? In a nutshell, by the 1840s, a new emphasis on holiness and Christian perfection began within American Methodism, brought about in large part by tent revivals and camp meetings from 1790 to 1840. The holiness movement believes that a second work of grace or second blessing refers to a personal experience subsequent to regeneration, in which the believer is cleansed from original sin. The Christian perfectionism movement is an outgrowth from holiness in that a second work of grace, think about the road to Damascus moment, when tax collector Saul becomes the apostle Paul, when the recipient of this blessing henceforth is not able to sin. This seems to stem from certain passages of the Bible, like 1 John, beginning with verse 4. We are using the NRS, New Revised Standard Version, and here it says, number 4, verse 4, everyone who commits sin is guilty of lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. 6, no one who him sins. No one who sins has either seen him nor known him. 7, little children, let no one deceive you. Everyone who does what is right is righteous, just as he is righteous. 8, everyone who commits sin is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning. Number 9, those who have been born of God do not sin because of God's seed abides in them. They cannot sin because they have been born of God. You can hear this when you are singing a hymn like Alas, and Did My Savior Bleed, with the words, it was there by faith I received my sight, and now I'm happy all the day. Methodist minister John S. Inskip, 1816 to 1884, a leader in this theology of worship, wrote, there is, however, one doctrine in a great measure particular to Methodism, in which we teach the possibility of a person attaining a state of grace in the present life, which he will be made free from sin. Fanny Crosby also wrote a number of non-religious songs, including The Flower Queen, the first secular cantata by an American composer. Things get entertaining, though, when we discuss the composer of this hymn, Silas J. Vail, 1818 to 1883, and I can find no picture of him, so I'll use a stand-in. Vail began his career opening a hattery in New York City after a long apprenticeship. Okay, making hats would have been a poor choice for anyone involved in this trade at the time. Mercury began being used by the French in the 1600s. It was a toxic solution that turned fur into felt, and due to poor ventilation in workshops, workers breathed in the mercury fumes which built up in their bodies. Eventually, hatters began to display unusual symptoms. These displays included dizziness, tremors, irritability, mental confusion, and poor memory. By the Victorian era, these symptoms were proverbial and called Hatter's shakes, Danbury shakes, and Mad Hatter disease. And of course, Victorians also used their ever-popular phrase, mad as a hatter. I found a great Warner Brothers cartoon as a medical example for you.
Here we see Maisie promenading on the boulevard, proudly wearing her new bonnet. Hats, hats, hats. Hats to the right of us, hats to the left of us. Let's pause a moment and pay tribute to those unsung heroes, those forgotten men, our hat designers. These geniuses of the headgear were once happy, carefree, normal men, even as you and I. They've sacrificed their lives for the things and stuff the fair sex put on top of their heads. They've given everything, their homes, their families, their futures, their lives. For what? For this, a woman's hat.
Veil left the trade around 1870. There was a difference between bonnets and hats in the year 1870. This was particularly due to the coiffures, as the hats were generally pulled back and piled high, which caused bonnets to be smaller and look similar to hats, except for ribbons fed under the chin. By fall, however, milliners attempted to increase the size of bonnets, but apparently coiffures were so voluminous that it was reported bonnets can find but very little place upon the head. But, by comparison, they get higher every day. Around 1865, women began wearing insects on their hats. One fashion journal reported, "Little insects of all kinds, especially flies, are good wearing bonnets. Besides flies, little insects included dragonflies, ladybugs, owl heads, and full-stuffed bird bodies. Baltimore orioles, hummingbirds, blue jays, robins, bluebirds, woodpeckers, and even prairie hens were used. Feathers were also used as they were considered a status symbol. The American Woman's Fashion magazine, Harper's Bazaar, decried the same thing. They reported in 1897, "Should there be an owl or ostrich left with a single feather apiece, hardly seems possible." Their statements were justified. It has been estimated that in 1886 alone, 5 million birds were slaughtered just for millinery feathers. Milliners, by the way, stood for the city of Milan. City of fashion. Look at all the fashion. The hat trade was also beginning to dwindle, and Henry Ford, with his affordable Model T, seems to have been instrumental in putting a stop to large hats and the use of feathers. Once he introduced the car, people found themselves buzzing around at breakneck speeds that caused fashionable hats to be ruined or blown off women's heads. Additionally, enclosed vehicles allowed no room for big hats. Incidentally, you can probably give JFK a break from accusing him. Yes, milliners did send him a letter basically to wear a hat, anyone's hat, but he didn't. You can possibly blame Eisenhower, who rarely wore hats and established the Eisenhower interstate system that made people want to drive without dealing with a hat. It's a pretty good guess. Anyway, after he left the profession, Silas J. Vail devoted his entire time and attention to music. He was the writer of much popular music for use in churches and Sunday schools. Fanny Crosby wrote expressly for him during many of the verses he set to music. Here's my musical example.
All along my Georgia line my live long day. 99 degrees and only half past May. Nailing down the metal with the cross-top blues. I had creosote all over my shoes. I hated it, you know. Now I swear I miss it. Every time I look down at my pale white skin. Of course I had it bad. Ain't not as bad as this is. It sure was better back then. Well, the cable cut my leg and boy, the damn thing bled. Foreman sold my muscle up with tarp patch thread. Sent me back to camp, go out for cook clean pans and scrub them down with Georgia red sand. I hated it, you know. Now I really miss it. Just staring at my TV till the broad